Good afternoon, everyone. We went through a great practice session a few days ago. Everything worked, and today nothing did. So I'm not sure if you can see me on the webcam or not. If you can, I'm holding a regular telephone instead of a speakerphone and talking into the computer because for some reason it didn't work. So anyway, we're going to do what we can with what we have. Today's webinar is titled All Tooled Out, and subtitle is Improving Your Organization by Inviting More Thinkers to the Circle. Now, whoops, see. Why didn't that move? There. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. I don't really want to read the bio per se, but I just want to say that I really like what I'm doing right now. I'm spending some time with clients coaching the frontline staff to learn how to think better and run some experiments by themselves to make improvements. And I'm also spending time with the management of the clients, helping them think about how to manage better. And I'll get into that a little bit later. I've just received a Shingo Award for a book in, I think it's April or May when we got the award, called Perfecting Patient Journeys. You may have heard of it. And I do a little bit of writing, not only for books, but for Huffington Post. I still teach at the Leam Enterprise Institute. I've been doing that since 1999. And I teach or coach master's students now at Ohio State University and their operational excellence programs. That's just a little bit about me. I'd also like to talk a little bit about the discussion today. In a lot of the webinars you may have been on, it's putting ideas on the table or suggesting things that work or don't work. And I want to take a little bit of different tack. I'd actually like you to do some thinking during this webinar. I don't want to be directive and tell you what to do. I'd like to share some observations and concerns and then give you time during the webinar to write down some thoughts. During the presentation, I'm actually going to be quiet and allow you to write some things down. And then hopefully those thoughts can trigger discussions or questions at the end, and it'll be hopefully a better discussion, a better set of questions as a result of being able to have some focused time to reflect on what I just said and write stuff down. So on with the webinar. I've been living with this model for over 20 years now, maybe 25 years, in terms of PDCA, and using that as a basis for continuous improvement, regardless of what moniker you put on it. If you put Lean or DMAIC or whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's a great model. It's been proven forever. My concern is not the model. My concern is how it's actually deployed. And what I'd like to take you through is my observations and maybe my worries about how it might be deployed, and challenge you to think about how you might want to improve deployment of it. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is acknowledge on this phone, there's probably a whole bunch of good people out there whose primary mission is to support other teams in continuous improvement. You may be part of a centralized staff. You may be centralized and assigned to a specific area. And in these cases, many of you probably walk into a situation where a team has a problem, and you help them think about what's going on. You help them put together a plan in terms of what might work better, and then you're busy reassigned to another job. And you might even help implement a little bit. But at some point, you cut the cord, you move on to the next team. That's not bad, but it's also not good. It's not good because the people left there may not know that there's a complete cycle to go through in terms of checking and adjusting. And they may not have the capability, even if they did know that, they may not know how to do that because they haven't been taught what check and adjust is. So if that's a situation and you actually leave before you can check and act or adjust, then people see this as a solution as opposed to a baseline for continuous improvement, and the model is no longer good. So that's one of the things I see missing. I also see missing a big effort to help management learn how to manage differently. I've seen that as you change the work, you also have to change how we manage the work because they're highly correlated. They need to be correlated. And if you yank one out and move it aside to another place, and management is still sitting back managing the old way, chances are that change is not sustainable because people and the work and the management have to be aligned. And once you break that alignment, you have to worry about how do we move management along at the same pace so they can manage differently as the work is done differently. So we have PDCA around the management system and learning cycles that typically is not addressed. And then we get to the all tooled out piece. where we're really, really good at the technical side of change. That's the T on the right. But we really forget about the social side of change. And that worked moderately well when we kept our focus on the manufacturing floor. But as soon as we got off there's a whole bunch of stuff going on that are more social than technical. And the real hurdles that I see in the office and service and healthcare environments is very much around the social pieces of change and not the technical piece of change. So it's really good to understand that there's a balance there, and you have to be deliberate about how much you put on the social side versus the technical side as you go through change. One more piece is what I call the delineation of thinking, and that different levels of the management, different levels of the organization need to focus on different types of problems. And when you don't do that, it is usually a mess. And I'll give you an example. We worked with a financial services company that was worried about improving their application rate for loans. And we had a really good set of frontline people doing the running experiments and figuring out how to make it flow faster. And they designed what we would see in manufacturing as a cell, where a group of cross-functional people got together in a small area, and the applications just flew through. They let it run for 2 months. They were baselining against the rest of the organization doing it the old way. And they had some great data that showed they had about a 250% improvement in productivity in getting them out much, much faster. So they were pretty proud of this. And they walked into the president's office to share it with them. And about halfway through, the president said, wait a minute, how many actuaries do you actually have on there? And they said, 2. And they said, well, you only need 1. I've been in this business for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. Just put 1 in there. And all of a sudden you saw the entire energy of the team leave the room because they were being dictated a solution which wouldn't work. They proved it wouldn't work, but it's what the boss wanted. And the boss had never even been down to look at the work. And this is a prime example of the wrong level of the organization doing the thinking for the problem at hand. So what I'd like to suggest is that as you delineate it, it really helps out a lot. And I'll talk more about that later. So when we look at the gap, I see a gap between how the model is used now and how we might want to use it. Right now, I see the model being used in terms of a tool-based dependency, where they get lots of people involved. That's a good thing. And lots of people do the thinking and learning. That's a good thing, too. But I question, are they the right ones? Is it the president of the company doing the thinking and learning, or is it the people in the front lines doing the thinking and the learning? Who needs to do the learning? Even to the point of the people on this webinar. Who should be doing the thinking for the problems you're helping them with? And how are they learning to think by themselves? And then improvements are indeed implemented. That's great. But who designed them? The people inside the work or people outside the work who had their own ideas of what might work? And how many people had input to their work? So it was just a few people that were redesigning it, or was this idea socialized and cast about to get different contexts? That's what I see as issues. So when we look at a tool-based dependency, maybe a different way to move forward from a tool-based dependency is being able to balance the tools and the social components of change by clear delineation of who should be solving what problem, deliberate engagement of everybody in the staff, not just the A team or a certain set of people stuck in the back room trying to figure things out. Most importantly, leaving the accountability for improvements at the right level. If the front line wants to make a change, they need to be accountable for making that change, and that means they need to be left to their own devices to try the change because they have to be accountable for it. Also, a supportive management system, I just talked about that. And as you do this, as you change the work and the way we manage the work, you've actually started to shift the culture to a different place. So working on this gap, to span this gap, there are 4 points I want to cover in just a moment. First is being deliberate about who solves what problem. Second is making sure we're working on the right things and not just anything that comes along. So we need to align our needs at the top for the organization with exactly what we're working on for change and challenge everything else. The next is change and audit responsibility for the different layers of the organization to coach, to create accountability for thinking at the right level as opposed to doing the thinking for them. And finally, to expand the thinking within one level, any certain level of the organization, broadly across that level, so lots of people get to be acknowledged and get their context seen, their reality seen. So I just gave you a whole bunch of stuff to think about, and I'd like to just take maybe 15, 20 seconds for you to make some notes. What are you thinking about? What's on your mind now? And we'll let that surface later. So I'm going to be quiet for 15, 20 seconds. Okay, so I'm back on board, and I'd like to take each one of the points I put on the slide previous to the break and talk about them. And here is an example of how one organization began to delineate what problems each level of the organization should solve. And I should probably put this in perspective. What we see is on the triangle are the different levels of the organization from the front line to the CEO. And then at the top, what we see on the left is what we're going to do to enable employees to problem solve. And on the right is types of problems to solve in the future state from 20,000 feet. And to take a couple of examples here, first of all, this is just the plant. This was a client with 3 manufacturing plants, and they made a commodity product. And the plant managers got together first and said, listen, can we all agree as plant managers and as the staffs of plants what problems each level should be working on and fix that first, and then we'll figure out how to take it up through the rest of the organization. But let's get the plants tied together first. So they did that, and this is their work in progress. As an example, if you look at the second level supervisors, they're going to enable employees to problem solve by engaging with the operators and making time for reflection. And the types of problems that the supervisors are going to solve are the performance gap to standard, why is it occurring, and also any issues that occur with schedule attainment problems. And if you go up a tier to the superintendents and stay on the right, they're responsible for solving repeated problems, lengthy problems, safety problems, problems of inconsistency, and they're also responsible to coach the supervisors in their problems. And they're going to do it, if you go over to the left, they're going to do it through humble inquiry and by following PDCA. So this is a very deliberate act. These are examples of very deliberate acts of what problems they should be looking at and what problems they shouldn't be looking at because it's someone else's job to look at. If we do this, and if they do this, this is a great way to hold each level accountable for the types of problems they have. And in doing so, every person in every level of the organization starts to strengthen their thinking muscle about continuous improvement. The second bullet point I talked about was alignment. And what we see here is the same type of diagram, the triangular diagram, and an effort to make sure that people are working on the right problems as opposed to any problem that comes along. So in this case, in the same case for the manufacturer, the people at the top were scratching their head saying, you know, this is a commodity business and our margins are starting to erode. If we don't increase our margins, we can't build a new plant, we can't invest in our future, et cetera. So we really need some margin improvements. They had other goals too, but this is just the path I'm coming down in terms of margin improvement. They handed that off saying, you know, we need to the value stream owners, these were the plant managers, and said we need to improve our overall margins by X%. And then the plant managers looked around and said, well, listen, we make a lot of different products here, but we think some of our products have more opportunities than others in terms of margin improvements. They're pretty bad. So we think these are the ones we can work on to make improvements. And then they handed it down to their supervisors at the front line and said, listen, these very specific product lines are the ones we want to focus on for margin improvement. We need your thinking on it. And they came back and said, you know what? In these specific product lines, scrap is the biggest problem. It's eating our lunch. So if we reduce the scrap, we'll improve the margins on the individual product lines, and then we'll improve the margins for the business. That means that they chose scrap reduction as their major effort. They weren't looking at setup reduction. They weren't looking at 5S. They were looking at scrap reduction, period. And by doing that, they aligned their resources to what was important to the company, and they shed or put aside things that weren't as important yet. And as they do that, the engagement had to change between the levels of the organization. I'm sorry, let me go back to another one. I'll go back here. Let me give you a healthcare example. I had one client who was concerned about the patient satisfaction in the community. It wasn't as high as somebody else down the road. And so they were very concerned and said, we really need to improve our patient satisfaction. They handled that by X%. They knew the gap they wanted to improve. They went down to the next level, in this case their service line directors, and say, we really need to work on patient satisfaction. Which service line should we look at? The service line directors chewed on that a bit and came back and said, these are the ones, let's get something going with the teams. And those specific service lines had teams engage in the value-added work in the bottom, in where they were focused on changing the care to get better patient satisfaction. Once again, not all service lines were involved because all service lines weren't targeted. It was very selective. And by doing that, you're aligning what they're doing, and you're also saying what they shouldn't be doing because the patient satisfaction is more important in this case. And as we do that, we worry about how to engage differently with our staffs. So on the left, we now see a different role and responsibility where the people at the top have their own problems. They need to do PDCA around whether their strategy is any good and whether it's moving ahead the way they want it to. And they also need to coach the next level down. So it could be the plant managers or it could be the service line directors as to how they're doing in terms of overall improvement for the service lines or value streams. The people at the value stream level need to solve their problems with the value stream from a system perspective, and also coach the people one more level down who are actually doing the work. So you see a change in responsibilities in terms of how they engage with the people and how they create a more supportive management system. Finally, the last bullet point I talked about was to engage more people. And to do this, I'd like to introduce socialization. Those of you who heard me about a year and a half ago may have already heard this, but socialization is a process. It's a process of reaching out across the organization to get other people's reality in your thinking. So it's not just a small group of people whose thoughts count. You actually bounce those off other people and find out what they're thinking. And as a result, you get their context embedded in the solutions. And there's much more appetite for it. There's much more engagement of the people, more excited because they're part of the thinking also. And this is a great way to do it. We actually talk about it in Perfecting Patient Journeys, but we want to be able to go out and find out what other people are thinking as we understand the current situation, as we think through different alternatives for the future state, as we develop experiments to test for the future state, etc. We're always worried about how do we get this word out and get their feedback, which would help craft a more robust solution. Now, I want to go back to tools for just a second. We are all tooled out, but more or less from a technical perspective. I think that there's some crossover tools that you might already have in your kit that can help move towards better social recognition and incorporation in your change. The first is value stream mapping. I'm sure most of you have done maps. You may have done a bunch of maps. I see them not as a technical tool. I see them as a social intervention. I'm not concerned about the numbers and the performance of the map as much as I am how the team is starting to gel and act as a unit and see the system as a problem as opposed to individual silos. And this is a great, great social tool that I encourage you to use as that. I'm not sure if you use it that way or not, but please consider doing that. Next is the A3. I have a feeling that most of you have done A3s, and you might have the perfect template, a standard template that never changes, and that you filled in the templates just great, and that you might have done it all by yourselves. The A3 is actually a social tool if you use it as a way to share your ideas with others, get their ideas back, incorporate their ideas and their data and their observations inside the A3. And then the A3 basically becomes a repository of engaged conversations. It just captures the essence and is a great social tool. And the last one is visual management. It is a great way to very quickly hold people accountable for the problems in a good way. That you're surfacing problems, you're asking about the problems, and you use that to engage differently in how you coach. So these tools are already out there, and they may be opportunities for you to just pick up and use differently. So that's my second load of information, and I'd like to keep quiet for 15, 20 seconds and have you write down some thoughts that I hope to hear about soon. Okay, I'm back online. So this is the slide I showed a while back, the 4 different points to worry about in terms of working on the gap. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time on what your role might be. And I have an assumption. My assumption is you're actively involved in some type of continuous improvement activity. You may or may not be in the front line. I'd like to talk about those who aren't on the front line and what your role might change to if you think this gap is worth working on. The first is to increase others' awareness about what they're doing and what they're thinking, and changing it to asking what they know and how they know it. So how do we focus on a problem and leave it with people who need to solve it and change the approach by asking what they know and how they know it? And then prompt them to question why it's happening. They get to figure it out and how they can prove it. And this changes the dynamics of the interactions you have with the people, because now they know that they have to start thinking about it. Finally, get them engaged in thinking about how to address problems and run experiments to test the ideas. So if you think about what you might be doing versus what I have on the slide here, for many of you, it could be a fundamentally different relationship that you have with the people you support. So I call this coaching for development. And it brings together 2 great skills. Facilitating how others see and think is a great thing to do. There are tons of great opportunities and ripple effects if you go down this path. And also, you can model PDCA with your teams, demonstrating the whole cycle and why it makes sense to go through the whole cycle. And to do that, I'd like to briefly discuss open and closed-ended questions. So if you want to interface with them differently, how do you interface? And it's all about the questions you ask. Closed-ended questions require a yes or a no. Do you like the food? Yes or no. In fact, chances are that waiter is leading you to say yes. They don't really want to hear no. So a lot of times, closed-ended questions are leading someone to agree with you. On the other hand, open-ended questions do not allow them to agree or disagree. They ask for their thinking. So for the waiters to say, what do you think about the meal tonight, requires a very different response. You have to think about it, and then you get to talk about whether it tastes any good, whether it's too hot, too cold, whether it's too early or too late, with the people next door at the next table too loud. Lots of things can go on, but they allow you, if someone asks you that, to respond and think about the response and not just a closed response. And this open-ended questions keeps the thinking alive inside the people who should be responsible for solving the problems. So just quickly, a few things to remember. This is my little cheat sheet. If someone comes to you with a problem, how you respond is critical, because it will immediately tell whether or not you are owning the problem or whether they are owning the problem. And if you answer the question, you own the problem. For instance, they come up to you and say, this process is a mess over here. We notice this, this, and this, and this. What should we do? If you actually answer the question, you are putting your thinking into the solution, not theirs. They need to figure it out, not you. Or if they come to you and say, hey, I'm having a real hard time trying to figure out what this data is telling me. Would you take a look at it? And you say, sure, I will. No problem at all. Guess what? You now own it. It's your analysis. It's not theirs. So once again, you've taken the accountability for problem solving away from them. Also, if you direct them, you say, you know, I really think you should go talk to marketing. All of a sudden, it's not their idea. It's yours. So you now own the thinking and the problem because you just ripped it away from them. If you correct them, you own it. And the last one that was kind of subtle, I'll have a story with it, but if you suggest ideas or add to his or her idea, you own the problem. And I'll give you an example. There was an absolutely brilliant physician who was managing an emergency department, and he was trying real hard to coach differently, to coach for development. And people would occasionally walk into his office and say, hey, I have this problem. This is what I'm thinking about doing with it. What do you think? And he would sit back and say, well, that's a great idea, but have you thought about adding X, Y, and Z? As soon as he said, have you thought about, he literally saw the energy leave the room. The people walked out not as proud, not as happy, not as focused or passionate, because basically he just disrupted their thinking, and all of a sudden it was what was important to him, not what was important to the people. And so he had to work very hard on not suggesting ideas, but asking different questions to engage their thinking. So if you don't want to respond like this, how do you respond? Great questions to find out what they actually know. What do you know about the situation? What their assumptions are? Even what they will agree to do more. So you can challenge them saying, well, it seems like you don't know enough about X, Y, and Z. What do you think would be good to go look at? And how do you expect to do it? Might be a coaching question. So those are the types of questions that will actually shift the ownership of the thinking to the right level of the organization. So this is your final chance to make some notes. I'm going to be quiet for another 15, 20 seconds, and then I'll do a wrap-up and take Q&A. Okay, wrapping up. The title of the webinar was All Tooled Out, and the subtitle was something like How to Engage More People in the Thinking. What I have personally seen in organizations, when you start doing this, you have better problem solving. And I mean that sincerely. The people who are closest to the problem are solving the problem. It could be front level, it could be strategic. Whatever level of the organization needs to solve the problem is better problem solving if you run down this line. And if it's better problem solving, chances are it's more sustainable because they've been doing a better job of finding out what's really going on and running PDCA to make something work. The cool thing about this, though, is actually increases your capacity to think about the right problems. So if the president of the financial company wasn't concerned about how many, I'm sorry, they were underwriters. I think I said something else. How many underwriters were inside the team? She could actually spend time thinking about more strategic efforts. And for every one of you who start to do the thinking for another group, if you allowed them to do it, you would free up your own capacity to solve your problems and have them build their thinking muscle. And if you do that, I'm absolutely convinced, and I've seen that the organization becomes more creative and adaptable. But the biggest challenge I think we have as a society is that we don't know the next set of changes that are coming at us. We don't know what's going to hit us next. But if we build an adaptable organization who's used to kind of breaking down the problem and understanding which level of the problem solves which problem, and we are good at it, we have stronger thinking muscles and problem-solving muscles, we're going to be able to adapt faster. I've actually seen that happen in some of the clients. And for you guys on the other end of the line who are worried about lots of teams doing lots of things, it actually helps you sleep better and creates more smiles. So I would like to suggest an assignment. If you think there's any merit or some merit in what I just discussed, how about running an experiment on changing your model around to something that might be along the path of closing the gap? So my questions to you are, what opportunity would you like to address in the model? What change would you like to make in your existing model? How will you do it? Who should be involved? And how will you know if it's better? And I don't know if you notice this or not. These are all open-ended questions. I'm not asking for a yes or no. I'm not directing you on what to do. I'm keeping the accountability of answering this question and designing an experiment with you. So, for more information on the social side, before Q&A, our book, Perfecting Patient Journeys, is really, really good in value stream mapping. It does have healthcare as a backdrop, but the content is applicable to any industry. For A3 thinking, the great book, Managing to Learn, written by John Shook, Perfecting Patient Journeys also has some really good points on visual management and socialization. And coaching for development, the best book that I've found is called Helping by Edgar Schein. He's a professor emeritus at MIT. It's a thin book, and it's worth its weight in gold. That's all I have for the webinar, and I'm very interested to see what you've been writing down in my silent gaps and what questions you might have.
All righty, Beau, thanks. That was awesome. As you were being silent, I was thinking through a lot of that stuff myself, and reflection is always interesting, for sure. Okay, let's go into Q&A. We're right about 12 after, so we have plenty of time. I'm going to read the questions that I have. The first couple actually were not questions, they were more comments as you were leaving those silent moments. Mohammed says, this was the first silence that you gave for reflection. I am thinking how tough it is to make the social change and to balance it with the technical change. Do you have any comments on that, Beau?
Yeah, the social change is the hardest for the offices of manufacturing groups, for service and healthcare organizations. It is by far the hardest, and it also will give you the biggest benefit. I was with some folks who were absolutely convinced that if you did 5 whys, you could solve any problem. And I'm thinking, what if the people just don't want to do anything? How are you going to solve that problem with a tool? And they would apply standard work or a new tool. That's not going to work. It's not always about 5 whys. It's about getting people to open up about what they think. And every time that I've done this with a client, the first month is the worst because they're not sure what happens, how to do it, etc. But what I would suggest is to see this as a continuous improvement process. How you engage and how you socialize. You don't know how to do that yet. So try something and then reflect and adjust and use the continuous improvement loop on socialization. We actually do this with the teams. We actually have them reflect and do PDCA on their socialization and make changes in socialization as they learn more. But it's a great point. Thanks.
Interesting. Okay. I'm going to slaughter this name, I'm sure. Ayana is what I'm going to guess, or Ayana. I'm thinking, do the upper levels with the problems, so the strategic level, know enough of the constraints to tell frontlines to take ownership of the problems? Interesting.
No. but they also know they're too far away to solve the problem. What they can do is say, we need to be at this level in 12 to 24 months, or our business is going to be a little shaky. We don't know how to get there, but we do know that we need to be this good. So we're relying on others to figure out what should happen. But if you notice, there's a two-way alignment. When they give it off to the value stream managers, and the value stream managers give it off to the supervisors, that's one way. And then you actually have to go back up the ladder and say, okay, if we've heard you, we understand we have to make these strategic changes you mentioned. This is how we think we can do it. And they might also put constraints on it, but at least be on the table and they can talk about it. So this is a two-way conversation where everyone agrees on, yeah, I think we can do it this way, but not that way. And that also is a process. Thank you.
Okay, Marie, what would you recommend as a starting point in a culture where people don't feel empowered?
Well, I'm actually in an office and a client that feels just that right now. Start somewhere. Start by, actually what I'm doing right now is I'm starting to work with the teams to get them engaged in getting data they didn't know existed and making sense out of it to turn data into facts and learnings. So the management has said we're worried about improvements in these certain areas. We don't know how to get there, and we've used those to create teams. The teams are actually working on the problems and doing things they've never done before in terms of gathering data. They don't even know what a Pareto chart is. So I'm working with them to show them that. And then I'm working with management to say, oh, by the way, when they come to you and show you stuff, how should you react differently? How do you engage differently? So this is not a baby step, but this is a pilot. You're not going to know what's going to happen until you try. But I would suggest trying to make a change with people who don't know much and helping them learn the process. Because if you don't, they're never going to learn it. And then at the same time, working with one or two levels of management, depending on how deep your management structure is, and engaging them to respond differently to keep the accountability and the problem solving at the right level. I'm not sure that that is a complete enough answer for you, but I really think you should just start somewhere and see what happens.
Well, and I think to your point, it's hard to answer those questions. Everybody wants the answer, but every organization and every culture is a little bit different. So I like that you kind of throw out that you've got to experiment and see what works in your environment, because it may not be the same thing that works in mine or somebody else's.
Right.
Excellent points. Okay, Joe says, what would be the first steps you would take in engaging more people in your company? Reality, a reality? And I'm not sure
I
if
would
it's the
do it.
same question or not.
Okay, well, I'll answer the questions if it were what would be the first steps in engaging more people. I think if you're working with a team on a specific problem, anything they come up with should be considered a draft or a straw man by definition, and let them know up front, listen, we're going to be working on this, but it's just your thinking, not anybody else's. So whatever we end up with in this room right now is a draft, and it's not final until we take it out and talk to the people who are impacted by this and get their reflections on what they really see happening or what might be better. And that it's that pause in the problem solving that allows people to run around and say, listen, this is what we're thinking. Please tell us what you think. Do you see this or not? What are your experiences? What do you think about this? That is a great place to start. And it can take, depending on the team and the organization, anywhere from 2 days to 3 weeks to socialize with the right people. And then when they're finished socializing, then I call that done for that piece of the problem-solving effort.
Perfect.
Then we move on.
Okay, this next one was actually one of the things I also reflected on, where you talked about value stream mapping and A3s being a social tool. And Joe says that makes perfect sense to him. He really never realized that. And I think that's probably the thought of a lot of people. So,
I get excited about that because people already know the technique. It's not about changing the technique. It's about broadening how you want to use it. And going back to where you might start with an A3 or value stream map because you already had the technique down. Now nudge the system a little bit to help make it more social.
absolutely. We all do it and we all have fun, but we don't purposefully do it as a social activity. And I think that's important. It's a great point. Sylvain. I always slaughter names here, so I apologize to all of you if I do that to you. That's why I have a very simple name like Chris.
What did your name used to be?
Well, it's actually Christiana, which is slaughtered a lot too. So that's why I said, not that I'm telling anybody they should change their names, but boy, I do the worst. So are the links to the books available? It was too fast to note. And maybe if you want to, while we're going through questions, Beau, you want to go back to that slide?
Yep.
That way folks can write them down. As far as links, I don't remember seeing the links on there, but I guess
I didn't have links. Perfecting Patient Journeys is available at lean.org, the Lean Enterprise Institute. Same with A3, same with Managing to Learn. Helping, I guess I got mine at Amazon. I don't know how MIT publishes, but I believe it was MIT Press, but I got it through Amazon.
Perfect. Okay, there you go for anybody that's looking for those books, and a quick internet search with your favorite browser will probably find you any and all of them. Okay, Susan, nice simple name. I didn't slaughter that one, I'm sure of it. Engaging, and in parentheses, she kind of questions convincing. Is that what we're really talking about? Senior managers, that delineation of thinking is an opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, so I have some thoughts on that, and I think so. Here's something more philosophical. I honestly believe 50 years ago, life was not as complex as it was now. I don't know because I was 50 years younger, so I'm not sure, but that's my guess. And my guess then is when life was pretty simple, only a few people needed to worry about some problems because there weren't that many. Now, it's like every time you turn around, there's 15 new problems a day. I don't believe management has the capacity to solve all the problems a day, and certainly not the skills. It's not that they aren't smart, but they don't even know what's going on, and they assume they know what's going on. So I would approach this saying that we simply don't have the capacity of a few people to do all the thinking, and it puts the entire organization at risk because half the time they aren't right. And it's not as good a solution as if the people in the trenches tried it. And once again, you might just ask for an experiment. Can we try having other people try to solve the problem and see what happens? So there's different ways of doing it, of engaging it, but I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that the people who now do the thinking in organizations don't have the capacity to solve all the problems in front of them, and they probably don't have the skills because they're not close enough. So a little bit of philosophy.
I'm going to jump down to a comment Carol made, and she was actually, I'm sure, referring to those that were looking for the your slide and the information on the slide with the books. And she mentions that the little camera on the upper right corner will take a snapshot of the screen to paste somewhere. Now, my screen does not have a little camera. I'm on a Mac, so I'm not sure where that's at. But if that's helpful to anybody, I wanted to make sure I mentioned that before everybody's hands got tired of writing everything down.
Yeah, I don't have one of those either, but if you have it, go ahead and click.
Yeah, absolutely. Easier the better. Mark asks, have you considered the flawless execution model for engaging teams and getting them to take ownership of the problems?
I don't know what that is, so I can't comment. I apologize. Did you say flawless?
Flawless execution.
I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with that. If it is similar, great. If it's not similar, I just don't know much about it.
And I'm not familiar myself. So it looks like we'll be internet searching also. See what it's all about. All right. Lewis, at the start of the social change, what tools do you suggest to gain commitment from the operators without directing or owning the change?
I would probably turn to a map drawn by the operators or an A3 developed by the operators. So if you change your paradigm, saying who should be drawing the map, I believe the people who do the work should be drawing the map. And I've always believed that. And the A3, the persons who are responsible for solving the problems, should be the one designing the A3. That does mean, though, that you have to help them because they probably don't know much about A3 and they probably don't know much about value stream mapping. So you can facilitate the effort. And there's absolutely no specific balance on when to be directive and when not to be. I find for different clients, if they don't even know how to look for data, I have to show them. And if they don't even know what a pie chart is, I have to show them. But once I show them, it's up to them to try to figure out how we put the data in there and what's the best way to do it. So I think your first project is going to be a little bit more directive than where you might end after you do this for a while. But I would suggest getting them involved in solving a problem. And solving a problem usually takes a form of starting with a value stream map if it's a flow problem, or an A3 if sometimes containment or defective problem.
Okay. Next comment or question. One of the biggest problems I face when working with a team is the discipline to keep moving forward and not slide backward. What advice do you have to prevent that from happening?
Well, I don't know enough to say much. I would actually ask you to do an analysis of why they're slipping backwards. So they could be slipping backwards because they have too much on their plates. They could be slipping backwards because their supervisors don't want them there. They could be slipping backwards because they're taking a different direction or they're worried about their job. So why are they slipping backwards? And actually, that's a great A3. And if you started an A3 with saying basically moving forward on projects as the title, and you looked at the projects that slip backwards, and you went to ask the people more information about what were the conditions in which they slipped backwards, to actually start doing A3 on that.
I like that idea. Joe says, the coaching mentioned sounds a lot like the Toyota Kata. What feedback do you have with regard to that?
It is. It is. But I would like a couple. So the problem with Toyota Kata, and it's not a problem in itself, it's just that people have taken different directions with it. So I'm not sure which direction you're taking. But the direction I remember is that in terms of the coaching kata, you had this little thing inside your shirt pocket that was laminated and had 4 or 5 questions. Ask the 4 or 5 questions. That's good, but I don't see any learning from it. In other words, these questions are supposed to elicit the response. An intervention is a PDCA. A review is a PDCA. A kata is a PDCA. So if these are the questions you asked, what did you plan to hear from it? Did you get what you wanted to out of those questions? And how would you change the questions? How would you learn from these questions? I haven't seen continuous improvement from the original questions in the coaching kata. So I'm a little concerned about that. I think it's a great starting point, but I don't think it's a great ending point. I think there needs to be more in terms of developing the management system and understanding how to coach the people better. But I salute the fact that they put it on the table and suggested an initial course of action. And one more. Most of the examples I've seen on the coaching kata is supervisor to front line or management to supervisor. What are the coaching questions from the C-suite to the value stream managers?
Mm-hmm.
This has to trickle all the way down, not just one level. And I haven't seen that. You could do it. I haven't seen it. So it's an opportunity. Good question.
Okay, I got a couple of extra comments. Mark came back. He was talking about the flawless execution, and he gave us the the name of the book, and he gave a link to Amazon for it. Unfortunately, I can't share that with you all based on the way the software works, but you know it's on Amazon. You can find it. It's called Flawless Execution. Use the techniques and systems of America's fighter pilots to perform at your peak and win the battles of the business world. So if anybody's interested, that is there. And I had another offer from Anna, who says she did take a snapshot if anybody wanted the JPEG that came out of that for this screen for the books. She's more than willing to send that to you. Of course, what I would do is have you email the email address, the host at asqrd.org, and we would pass that on. All righty. Well, if there's no other questions, we are like ending perfectly on time. I don't know that this has ever happened in the lifetime of all the webinars. So, Beau, you're just perfect. What can I say?
Well, I actually have one more slide.
Oh,
just
there
in
you
case
go.
you have more information, email me. My contact information is below. If you want more information, if you like a discount on Perfecting Patient Journeys, I can probably get, I forget what shipping is, but it's effectively 20 or 25% off a list. That includes shipping. And if you just want some more help in thinking through how to begin, email me, and we can have a conversation.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you once again. I really appreciate that you've taken time out of your day and shared your expertise with us and all of your knowledge. And we look forward to hearing more of all of your experiences in your upcoming books. So with
Great.
that, I want to one more time just remind everybody that the webinar is recorded. I will stop the recording, have it up 7 to 10 days on the website, asq.org/LE. That's the Lean Enterprise Division website, in about 7 to 10 days. Or you can go to and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, and in that box up at the top, search for ASQ Lean Enterprise Division, and you will find our channel. Subscribe, and within about 3 or 4 days, you'll see the notice that the webinar is up there. Next month, I hope you will all join us. Lance is an excellent speaker, has some great stuff, and looking forward to having you all back again. Thank you all so much for coming this month, and we really appreciate you being division members. So with that, Beau, thank you again. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. Please join us again next month for another great Lean Enterprise Division webinar topic. Thank you and have a wonderful day.